intelligence. And we're very excited to have three specialists joining us as panelists to share their perspectives on artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. As I now have some words to describe your perspectives on these tools, I also want to know artificial intelligence's perspective on English language specialists. And so on this next slide, the image you see on the screen is an artificial intelligence produced image based on a description of English language fellows, virtual educators, and specialists, which is interesting, although I'm not sure how accurate it is. On the right, we have an actual English language specialist. I'm not sure how much she looks like those folks on the left. But I think suffice to say, these exciting new technologies have a lot of promise, even as they present new challenges for us. So the format today is a panel discussion. Three English language specialists who have experience in the field of artificial intelligence will be sharing their perspectives with us, and I'll be introducing them shortly. Feel free to leave questions in the chat throughout the panel. We'll have time to address those questions at the end. And we'll also share slides of this event to all attendees and registrants after the webinar. My name is Ben Taylor. I'm an outreach coordinator with English language programs, and I will be facilitating today's panel discussion. I first came into English language programs as a fellow in Kazakhstan back in 2016 through 2018. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life, so it's been a joy working as your program coordinator. And as you can see from the slide here, these fields, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, generative tools, are tremendously important for all three of our programs, not only for the specialist program, but also for fellows and for virtual educators as well. And so high needs ESP areas in all regions, and increasingly a component in broader projects as well. And here to expand on that is our very special guest via video today. It's Tony Newman, who is a global program officer with the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, working with the specialist program specifically. And I'm going to let Tony take it away from here.
Hello, my name is Tony Newman, and I'm the Global Program Officer for the English Language Specialist Program at the U.S. Department of State. And on behalf of our Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and on behalf of the Specialist Program, I am thrilled to welcome you to our Specialist webinar. For over 30 years, the English Language Specialist Program has demonstrated that its leadership, multiculturalism, people-to-people connections, and public diplomacy can maintain healthy diplomatic relations, develop leadership in English language education, as well as foster the perspective and skill set necessary to address the multifaceted challenges and opportunities that we face today. In the face of rapid advancing technology, the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs acknowledges the critical role of digital literacy for both educators and students. Leveraging tools such as ChatGPT and similar platforms, our objective is to adeptly navigate the digital domain, to bridge international communication divides, and to usher in groundbreaking pedagogical approaches. This webinar is a testament to our dedication to equipping educators for a future seamlessly integrated with AI, and to strengthen U.S. ties with other countries through combined technological and educational initiatives. A standout feature of the AI revolution is the unprecedented opportunity it offers us to virtually collaborate with our esteemed global experts. And today serves as a prime example. With insights forthcoming from our three English language specialists, Elizabeth Plummer, Dongping Zheng, and Christina Cavage. I am truly delighted to have you join us to delve into the transformative capabilities of AI and ChatGPT within the realm of English language education. Thank you.
Right. So this event today wouldn't have been possible without Tony Newman. and without the support of the U.S. State Department, of which the artificial intelligence and ChatGPT are major features and focuses right now. So we've already learned a little bit about you from the chat. I'm going to jump in, jumping back in for a second. I see new man. Oh, Carlos says, not sure Tony's real. I can assure you he is. I'm not that good with the technology yet. I promise you that. So good stuff. I've learned a little bit about you through chat. I'd like to learn a little more. I think we could learn a little more about each other before moving on. And so in order to do that, I've got a poll that I'd like to take now. So please go ahead, answer these questions. We'll learn a little bit more about each other. All right. So that's not everybody we had in here, but we can see some of the results if I share them here. And you can see we've got a nice cross section, a lot of people in higher education, but people all over the field here. Again, also, some of us always use ChatGPT or AI tools in lesson planning and instruction. That's pretty impressive, I suppose. Some people say sometimes. I would say that's where I'm at. Some people are saying never. That's certainly where I was at pretty recently. My students use ChatGPT or AI tools. And again, this says a lot about where we're at right now as an industry. I think over half of us are saying I don't know, and I think that's totally understandable. That's one of the reasons we're here, right? Does your institution have an AI or ChatGPT policy? A lot of people are saying no. There's about a fourth of us that are saying yes. So this is something that we can assume those policies are going to be more pressing as time comes, right? And we do have a lot of alumni in here, but I also want to welcome those people who are in the specialist project pool, people who are current project participants, and also people who are not alumni or current participants at all. Welcome to all of you. So thank you so much. Thank you again for your candid responses. No matter where you are in your journey with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, we're glad you're here. So without further ado, I'm happy to introduce today's three panelists. Elizabeth Plummer is a faculty member of San Antonio College and also the American College of Education. She's been a specialist in Vietnam, South Africa, Madagascar, and Angola. Dongping Zheng comes to us from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where she's an associate professor in the Department of Second Language Studies, and she's been a specialist in Vietnam, both virtually and in person. And then we've also got Christina Cavage coming to us as a curriculum and assessment manager with Immerse, which is an immersive language and VR learning platform for international language learners. And she's been a specialist in Belarus, Russia, and Vietnam. So welcome, panelists. And before we get into questions for our panelist, Christina Cavage, is going to unpack a few terms key to this discussion. So Christina, without any further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ben. And I just want to say my headshot was AI generated. So, but it was AI generated from several pics that I submitted, and it got my wrinkles and everything. So yeah, let's unpack a few really key terms. I guess about last January, February, the term AI became huge across higher education and other educational institutions. And so we really need to be very clear about what's AI, what's generative AI, and then large language models. So if we first look at the definition of AI, if we go to the next slide there, we're going to see that AI is artificial intelligence that refers to the capability of machines, particular computers, really to mimic and perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. And I do want to point out that AI has been around forever. Okay, so we've been using AI, our smartphones, our smart homes, our maps, all are AI driven. So AI has been with us for a long time. If we look then at generative AI, okay, because this is really what I think has taken over our attention in the field. It is one type of AI. It is one type of artificial intelligence. And generative AI, think of it this way, it generates new content based on our inputs. So it can be a text, it can be image, it can be sound. ChatGPT, Bard, and the like are all a type of generative AI. And they're a type of generative AI because of our large language models. So if we look at that next one, our large language models really is the brain of generative AI. What it does is it scours everything out there, and it looks at language structures and grammar and context and semantic linkages, and then is able to use that knowledge, right? It's a piece of our generative AI. It's that brain to create it, working together in the generative, create that new content. So I like to think of it this way. If we look at the next slide, we'll see an image that I think we can all, that might resonate with all of us. We have AI, this big umbrella. Within AI, there's several different types of AI depending on their functionality. But generative AI, the kind that generates new content, and it uses that brain of generative AI, when we talk about ChatGPT specifically, is a large language model. So going out there, looking at structures, looking at features, and then using that to generate. So I think it's really important when we talk about ChatGPT, we understand that it's generative, right? It's one type of this big umbrella of AI.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. And now we're going to move to the panel component of today's event. So we've already asked everyone in attendance today, and this seems like a great place to start with our panelists as well. Christina, you're up first. In one word, how would you describe ChatGPT and AI in the context of your current work, and why?
Great. This is my favorite question. It's a tool. Just like when I started teaching, a textbook was a tool, or a whiteboard was a tool, or not to date myself, but when the internet came out when I was teaching, it was something we all feared. It was just another tool. And with every tool that's come across, man has evolved, right? And sometimes we use these tools for good, and sometimes we use these tools for evil. So I think of it as just another tool in my toolkit for teaching and learning.
Thanks, Christina. Dongping, I'm interested in your response on this one as well.
Hi, yes, I'm going to respond it from a humane AI perspective. So I will use the word friend to describe a ChatGPT or other AI, as Christina introduced. I'm saying that because especially the generative AI, it responds to us, right? So when we have a friend, the friend sometimes and most of the times we can rely on when we have difficulties, when we need help. But at the same time, we also give feedback, and sometimes very critical feedback to the friend. So this new generation of AI can be our friend, but not just friendly, meet our needs, but also we need to teach them and help them. So I use the Confucian philosophy to portray friendship. So a person who are both critical and demanding should be a good friend, because friends usually very friendly. We need that critical and demanding aspect of friend to tell and teach AI to do its good. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dongping. Elizabeth, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so if I were to describe ChatGPT and the AI that I use, I would say they are my co-teacher. They help me build my lessons. They help me to get examples. The other day, I was trying to simplify some definitions for my reading students, and I used AI to help me simplify those definitions, replace words, and which frees my my brain up in order to come up with more interesting activities for my students, because I'm not spending that time trying to come up with definitions. Instead, I'm spending that brain capacity to be able to think about more interesting things and engage and be more fully present with my students.
Those are lovely responses. Thank you, panelists, all three of you, for your responses. Our next question is also for the whole group. And before I ask this question, let me just encourage those of you participants in today's event, attendees, feel free to write any pressing questions you have on these topics into our chat, and we'll try to return to those later on in today's panel discussion. Our next question is also for the whole group. As AI becomes more prevalent in language learning, how do you see the role of the English language teacher evolving? Dongping, we're going to pass this one to you first, if you'd like.
All right, so I'll be a little bit brief, and if I have time, I can elaborate my viewpoint. I believe the role of English language teacher becomes increasingly important in their bilingual, multilingual, bicultural, multicultural competencies. So in the case of native English speakers as teachers, they will need to develop more balanced bilingual, multilingual, multicultural skills. And for teachers who speak English as their additional language, will need to develop even stronger bicultural identity and agency, especially of their own cultural competencies, as well as media literacies, to help their students to make better friends with AI.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Elizabeth, your response on this one?
Yeah, so I think the role of the English language teacher will shift from presenting knowledge and information into how to evaluate the information that we have. So my students right now in my writing class, they're looking at AI generated paragraphs. They're comparing them to their own paragraphs. They're looking for vocabulary they don't know. They're trying to decide, why do I need to come to writing class if AI will write my paragraphs for me? And answering that question is the center of this, right? They come to language class because we get something in our language classes that they can't get from AI. They get those interactions with other students. They get that cultural knowledge. They get that support system. We get to facilitate the learning. We get to look at the AI and what is coming out of the AI and analyze it for its biases, analyze it for what it is producing. And so I do less, formal teaching with my students, because they do a little bit of that with the AI activities that they do, and more sort of facilitating our learning and our discussions and our engagements among each other.
Great. Thank you so much. I love the kind of communal, community focused aspect of that as well. Christine, how would you respond to this?
Yeah, I definitely, agree with both my colleagues. I feel though, in one position, we have the opportunity to be more creative now as educators, right? Because we have a lot of that content. And Elizabeth gave a great example about the definitions. Like, how much time did we spend before finding really clear definitions? But now I can spend that time creating an activity that would engage my learners using those definitions in a natural context. I also think we become curators of content now. Okay, so, it's like those old days when you would get like 20 textbooks in front of you and you would scour them to see which one best met the needs of your learners, and you pulled from here and you pulled from there. So being able to use some of the generative AI tools, we have to curate that content, because that content, while it mimics humans, it is not a human. So there is no emotion, there is no tone, there is no cultural nuance. there's no context in which maybe a certain register would be appropriate or not. So, I think our roles are becoming more important with generative AI because, we're the holders of that kind of information, contextual knowledge about language, cultural knowledge about language. So I think we have the opportunity to be more creative, but we also have to become curators.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's a lovely turn of phrase, curators of content, and I think that's pretty well spot on where we're at. The next question here, we'll be starting with Elizabeth on this one, but many newcomers to the field of artificial intelligence and these generative tools such as ChatGPT may find this question particularly useful. And as we saw in the poll, quite a few of us are in fact newcomers to this field. So how does one get started using artificial intelligence and ChatGPT? What would you do with tools like ChatGPT? What would you do with AI if you were just starting out? And again, Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
Yes. So I think this is fantastic. First, you have to pick the tool you want to get started with. And I am not going to recommend one tool over the other. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses, most importantly in their privacy concerns, right? In the amount of data they're collecting. And so you have to pick a tool that you feel comfortable with, the company that runs the tool, and them collecting your data. So most of these tools have the option to play with certain versions of them for free, which is great. So you can try it out and see if you like it, and you don't have to invest any money. To get more robust features, you do have to invest in paying for some of the premium features. I do not pay for any premium features. I just use multiple different AIs for different purposes. For me, I use 6 or 7 different AIs for different purposes. So stick with one first. So pick an AI tool. And then the first thing I tell individuals to do is to ask AI to do an assignment that you have your students do. And that's a great place to get started. So see what it comes up with, see what would happen if your students used it. And I think that's really eye-opening for us as educators as we get started. Then the next thing I would have you ask it do is to help you create a lesson plan, right? So be very specific. This is the level of my students. This is how long I want my lesson plan to be. This is the topic of it. And then see what it comes up with. And so once you do those 2 things, then you kind of can start playing with some of the other features.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I love that kind of firsthand experiential approach to putting your students in the driver's seat. I think that's probably an excellent way to go about this. Christine, how would you respond to this? What advice would you give to newcomers to this field?
Yes. So I'd probably echo a lot that Elizabeth said. First of all, I would think of my purpose. What is my purpose in using this? And I'll go back to, my definition, or my one word with generative AI, which is it's a tool. So you saw when it first came out, people either completely embraced it and became used by the tool, or they became completely fearful of the tool. I always say, do not be used by a tool, but use the tool. So if I'm going to have soup, I'm not going to go to my kitchen and get a knife to feed myself my soup, right? I'm going to use a spoon. So I have to decide, what's my purpose in using that tool? What is my purpose? Is my purpose going to be to, assess a level? And I do this a lot. I'll take a textbook and I'll copy a paragraph, even though the textbook might say it's a B1 level. I'll put it in AI just to assess what that level truly is. Or if I write something myself, I'll put it in there and determine the level. So you have to think about, what is your purpose for using it? And then, how are you using, what's your overall goal in using that tool? Is it for efficiency? Is it to generate more content? Is it, do you want to assist your students in some way? So, really, really focusing on that purpose and recognizing that it is just one tool. It's not the be all and end all. And I think that's the problem. People who completely embraced it became so obsessed with it, especially ChatGPT, that they're not generating anything themselves. And it's, I had somebody hand in something the other day, not a student, but a coworker. And clearly it was generated by ChatGPT, and something that they didn't even look and read beforehand. And it was really marked. So thinking about your purpose, thinking about, I use AI every day at my job, but I use it strategically. And I think that's what it comes down to, making good choices about when and where you could use it.
Thank you, Christine. I think some very important points coming out of there. My father, not an academic in the slightest, but very interested in artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, sends me entertaining kind of snippets, examples like what you're talking about all the time. And there was an athlete who passed away a couple of days ago at age 42, and the headline created by artificial intelligence and just shared, as you're talking about your colleagues, just shared online without probably a second thought, says the person's name, and then it says useless at 42. Useless is probably not the way we would describe someone who's passed away. So that's artificial intelligence maybe needing to be modulated or curated a little bit more than it already is. Dongping, your thoughts on this? How would one get started using AI and ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think my colleagues have already very well elaborated the ways in which they use AI. I would like to add on to what they have said already. So based on your pedagogical goals, for me, I'm a strong advocate of problem-based learning and project-based learning. So the AI tools could be very well leveraged to help students to take their initiative role to get started with a project, use AI to help them generate ideas. But first, perhaps to allow students to play. I would call it more of a mindful play. Encourage students to have a conversation with AI, such as ChatGPT 3.5 is free for now. And 4 probably soon will be opened up for free, to encourage them to have a conversation with ChatGPT and see what the responses are, and encourage them to use both their home languages and additional languages, to especially English, to engage the friendship. Because the ChatGPT that is based on the large language model is basically from the languages that we as consumers of the internet input on the internet. So lots of the good data, or people who get bullied off, their input, their perspectives are perhaps not reflected in the large language model. So we need to raise the child of AI to teach them what are some of the cultural perspectives that our diverse students appreciate, why ChatGPT did not have that perspective. So I'll turn the students into their very agentic being and mindful being to teach AI, to help them to be better at what they're doing, whether it's writing some essays or sending an email to the boss, right? So I would call it more of a mindful play, until to the point that they don't have an answer. And this is where they feel the strong need. Okay, teacher, I need your help. I don't understand what ChatGPT is telling me. Can you help me? And this is where we can provide just for the moment teaching on the fly. This is where really it can make sense to students why teaching AI, using AI is not only help us learn, but our very ethical responsibility, no matter how old we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Dongping. And I'm just loving for all three panelists, the kind of continuity and commonality between some of these responses, that element of play and exploration. It's very similar to some of that experiential learning that we were kind of referring to earlier. And I think that probably does a lot to help with students' feelings of apprehension, just like it might with educators who feel apprehensive about use of some of these tools. So thank you so much, again, all three of our panelists. What tips and ideas do you have for teaching with artificial intelligence? And what advice do you have for coaching students and teachers on using these tools? And we will start here with Elizabeth again. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that I say for tips for teachers is not to be afraid of bringing it into your classroom, because even the teachers that I work with in my positions, they're afraid that if they bring it in, then students are going to use it. So instead they say you can't use it, and then the students use it on their own. So what I do is that I tell my students, we're going to work with AI. I'm going to show you how to use AI. And so one of the things we do is we might do idea generator, and they might use AI to help them generate ideas so they can see how they use that. I talked about, I get definitions. I teach my students how they can get definitions from AI, so that they are using English as opposed to translating. So before you translate, go to AI and see if you can get a simpler definition to help them in building that at that skill. And then I also use AI in terms of teaching in the classroom. I talked about how we do comparisons between what AI wrote and what I wrote. We do comparisons among brainstorming ideas, right? So we'll have a topic and we'll brainstorm ideas, and then we'll have AI brainstorm ideas and say, hey, what did we miss that it says? And are these good ideas? So critically thinking about, and coaching students and teachers on using these tools. So with my students, I don't require any of my students to sign up for AI. And that is, I think, the first and most important thing for me, because I don't want to ask my students to have to go into a system that they might have their privacy or their security or any of their safety sort of compromised. So that's the first thing that I do. And so when I build activities, I utilize tools that either they use my account that I've created. I have dummy accounts that I'll create. So they use that account to sort of do it. And then I start in coaching students with prompt generation, which is what you input into the system. And so when you coach the students, because they're language learners, oftentimes they don't know what to ask and how to ask it. So I'll give them some sentence frames and they'll type it in so that they can learn how to do prompt generation. And then they have things come out. So we'll start with them saying the same thing. And then I'll say, now let's replace some of these words and see what different things that you can ask it. And then with teachers, so teachers I find are a little bit less hesitant to use it, but just yesterday I was coaching a teacher on how to use it for reading and for creating reading assessments, because we're using a new book and we have no assessments from the publisher, and she's struggling with coming up with assessments. And I say, I just use AI to help me create all my assessments, right? And so giving teachers a specific concrete thing that they can do to help them with something they're struggling with, I think that really helps them to see how it can be really beneficial.
Great insights, Elizabeth. Thank you. Dongping, what tips and ideas do you have for teaching with AI and coaching students and teachers on use of these tools?
Yeah, I will continue with the previous concept of play. So use AI, because AI ChatGPT does know multiple languages, but the languages that AI use is translated from the monolingual. primarily in English. So when we encourage students who do not have much to say, as Elizabeth described, a lot of times students just, even though they have lots of prior knowledge in their home language, but when it comes to English, they just become tongue-tied. So in that case, encourage them to use translanguaging, to use anything that they would express themselves in their home language, and start using translation feature of AI. Then that would be a great opportunity to teach them critical thinking, evaluation, teaching AI, because the translation is only a representative of semantic features. It does not have persona. It does not have personal meaning that relate to the writers the writers themselves. So then teach them to fine tune. How can you make your input more tailored to your own needs, your own culture? So again, start conversation and slowly to get into the way-making process, so that students feel, oh, I have a handle of this. I want to continue with the conversation and help me to generate new ideas. Then what teachers do? Teachers, I think, they become more of coaches, as you said, but they need to encourage students, challenge students, support students in the ways in which that students feel a sense of sensibility of getting to know things on their own. So the ultimate goal, again, from the project-based learning point of view, is to teach them to be independent on their own thinking and writing using tools such as AI, and interdependent with AI, so that they can teach AI to do things for the general good. As long as they feel good about themselves, about their classmates, about their community, I think that's a good measure for the assessment and success of AI use.
Thank you, Dongping. I love that kind of cap off of thinking about the well-being of your students and their self-identification in this. Christina, anything you'd like to add here?
Well, I think my colleagues hit it all pretty well. I do want to say it's important, I think, to start small. It can be very overwhelming. And I do love the idea of using things like ChatGPT to build critical thinking, but also cultural knowledge. It's a great tool to be able to fill in the gaps of cultural knowledge. Prompt generation, it's language teaching. So teaching learners how to write prompts is teaching language. And lastly, I'll just add, the APA has a citation now for ChatGPT. And so we know our students are going to use it, right? So teaching them that this is just another citation opportunity, right? Just like when they're looking things up in the library. So I think we have to be cognizant and not avoid it, but recognize it and then teach our learners how to use it appropriately by citation.
Thank you so much. I wasn't actually aware of the APA citation myself, so that's a fascinating development as well. Thank you so much, Christine. And so this is the question I thought we were on before. My apologies earlier. So for Elizabeth and Christine, Elizabeth having just finished a project, Christine currently being in a project that focuses heavily on artificial intelligence and these kind of generative tools. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've done with AI and ChatGPT during your specialist projects, and how the teachers you've worked with or are working with right now are responding or did respond to that new technology? I'll start with you, Elizabeth, since you're finished with your project here.
Yeah, so I worked with teachers in Vietnam, and it was on teaching them how to teach with AI programs. And so I worked really simply on basics of teaching with AI, with providing tips and suggestions. The teachers there are really excited about it. They have a lot of knowledge, but also they have a lot of concerns, as many of us do. Several of the teachers said, you know, I was worried about AI, and then you said just try it, because if you don't try it, then you're worried about something you don't know anything about, just from hearsay. So you want firsthand knowledge. And so that's what I think a lot of them took away from the work. You know, me as an individual, I need to find out for myself what this is. And you can find out without needing to actually play with the AI. There are recordings of people showing what they are doing with AI. Right. So you can do that. You can go on YouTube and you can watch videos of language teachers and language learners where they do the screenshot and they show themselves using it. Right. So I think that's a great thing for someone who's like, I don't really actually want to use AI. So it was a fantastic project. They're so excited about AI that they find ways to use AI programs that are not available in Vietnam and how to circumvent, because they really want access to it.
It's fascinating. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Christina, can you speak a little bit about how this is happening in the project you're currently on?
Sure. So I'm working with educators in both Russia and Belarus right now. And basically, the beginning of the project is really just building an understanding and an acceptance of generative AI. But our real focus on the project is what tools can we use that can help us with different pedagogical needs we may have. So we're looking at using AI for vocabulary building. We're looking at AI for reading and writing skills. We're looking at AI for listening, speaking, pronunciation. And we're looking at tools that we can use with assessment. So at the core of it is all about how can we become more efficient as educators, but also more literate when it comes to some of these digital tools. So, you know, I just met with some of the educators yesterday, and some of the same responses we got today when we talked about how do we feel about AI. A lot of fear, a lot of unknown. So we're just really slowly unpacking it. And again, I'm coming at it from a perspective of just another tool that we can add to our toolkit. So let's leverage this tool to both enhance our teaching, but also enhance our students' learning.
Thank you. Extremely well spoken, of course, and a great answer there as well. Thank you so much, Christina, and the best of luck to you for the remainder of your project as well. We have one more question for our panelists, and then I'd like to hand it over to some questions from our participants. This one's for the whole panel. What challenges and opportunities do you foresee with the increasing role of artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT in the English language classroom? There's been some work towards addressing this already in some of your excellent responses. How might this reshape traditional teaching methodologies? And we're going to start with Dongping on this one. So Dongping, please.
Okay, so this is a tough one, actually. Very good question, very timely question. I would say there are two contexts to work with. First, in the immediate context, the challenges may involve around teachers mainly concerned that they are being replaced by AI. Because we see on the internet, some AI is just as real as human, right? So then we need to think about teacher training, what technology's role in our overall curriculum of language teacher education. If we don't address curriculum for teacher training, I'm afraid that day may come because students are so savvy using these technological tools. They may not need to take language classes. They may just take the placement test and pass the test. But there's a danger of that, right? When humane and humanity is not involved in the technological advancement, we are going one-way road. We lose diversity. we lose that opportunity to celebrate the multiculturalism that revolve around English language teaching. So in the long run, the other aspect in the context of a long term, looking ahead, I think the core challenges appear to be, again, in the training program, especially in the research agenda, because our current pedagogies are built upon by research conducted in classrooms where technology was not prevalent, was not available. So the context in which we are working now is very different. Students have their smartphones, home equipped with technological devices. Even in the impoverished areas, cell phones still available, or public libraries. There's still gap. I'm not saying that our world is in the full capacity of equity, but mostly technology is very available. So in that case, how can we advance and rethink about our research agenda that leverage technology in the context of classroom? What are the relationships between teacher, classroom, and technology in their research agenda? That would be a long run looking ahead to things to worry about. Okay, I hope that makes sense.
I think it does, Dongping, and thank you so much for laying out some much needed framework there for us. Elizabeth, how would you respond to this?
I think one of the challenges is access to AI. And so there's not equitable access around the world. There's not equitable access within classrooms. And so we can create a situation where we have learners who access this and then are able to go on and be more successful than learners who are not able to access this. So I think that's one of the big challenges. One of the opportunities we have is that we have the ability to really think about the way our classrooms are functioning and the way that we build our classrooms, whether or not they be in-person classrooms or online classrooms or hybrid classrooms, right? So we can rethink that. And I think our students are going to be open to it in a way that they may not have been in the past. And so we can do more innovative types of things, and our students might be more willing to try them out.
I love that. Thank you so much. Christine, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll be real quick so we have time for questions. Just agreeing with my colleagues there, but just to add one thing for that last piece, how might it reshape traditional teaching methodologies? I really think that as educators, we need to bring in a lot more critical thinking now into our classrooms and really explicitly teaching our students critical thinking skills so that they also can navigate all of these new systems that are coming out and really hitting the market hard.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you again to our panelists for your insight and perspective throughout this discussion. As Christina just very rightly noticed, and thank you for keeping that answer short so we would have time for some audience-generated questions. We do have a couple of great questions here. We've actually got a ton of great questions here. And so I see some commonalities in some of these questions. And one of those commonalities is a lot of people are interested in tools that detect AI-generated text. And so the question essentially boils down to this. Are you familiar with research on the efficacy of tools that detect AI-generated text? And in other words, can we trust a computer that says it's AI-generated, or do we trust the student who claims that it is not AI-generated? And then I guess along with that, just general thoughts on tools like that.
I would really love to answer this question because I get this a lot from a lot of individuals. And Harvard University put out a study this year that showed that all of those AI detectors, saying, is this written, that they are biased towards our English language learners. And so in more than 50% of the cases, they classified text that they know was created by an English language learner, as by a non-native speaker, as being written by AI. And the reasons are because our students are taught to write in very formulaic ways. And that's what the AI detectors are looking for. They're looking for very formulaic speech, because that is also how AI writes. So I don't think that you can trust them. The thing that I do with my students, if I think that maybe they've used AI, I'll sit down with them and then I'll ask them about their writing. Why did you make this choice? Why was this here? Right. And so then as they go through it, if they did use AI, they can't answer those kinds of questions. And then it's clear in that sense.
Great, thank you. I open it up to the rest of the panel. Any other responses?
Yeah, let me just follow up. I really like what Elizabeth does, so I'm taking the notes on stressing the process rather than end result, and really use the opportunity to get to know your students. Right? Again, AI is not our enemy. And when students really doing the writing using tools, they have to go through quite a bit of critical thinking, evaluation, judgment, whether to use this word or not. Teach them how to revise and editing the AI generated texts. And trust them, they will do a good job. And teach them how can you make this essay with a personal flavor, personal identity, personal thing, right? That can be identified as you, not a generative AI, not general as no emotional usually erased in those AI generated text, right? So using that as a process to get to know your students.
Thank you so much, Dongping. Christina, you're welcome to, if you have anything else to add.
I'll just quickly add, while there are some tools that are detectors today, there is really not a very evolved detector. So I do think that is coming, but I don't think we're quite there yet with the tools that are able to detect if it's been generated by AI.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question, and I do just want to preface this question. There's a fair amount to unpack, but I think it's a great question. So I'm gonna read it in full. Many of us work in international contexts with limited access to internet. There was a recent report released by UNESCO highlighting the staggering inequalities that dependence on educational tech has caused from data based on remote learning in COVID. This is similar to some of what you guys have already said about inequality. Generative AI for education is understudied, but will certainly have dynamic implications. So what are your thoughts on this? How can we promote an ethical and justice-oriented response to generative AI in our work as global educators? I'll pass that to anyone who feels up to answering that.
Wow, that's a really great question. I would also go back to my original theme, which is to really cultivate multilingual, multiculturalism, and help teachers in our international locations to be agentic, to start think about their authentic roles in language teaching, their advantages of being a language teacher, and how they can better collaborate with us, with people who have lots of resources and have wide open resources of the internet. So how can we make that collaboration happen so that benefits us being educated by our diverse cultures and them being helped with resources that's not available to them. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Dongping. Elizabeth, I know you have a class in just a couple minutes, so I'll hand it to you next if there's anything you'd like to add on this topic.
One of the things that I think is that when we're talking about advocating for ethics, I think that governments around the world are going to be really slow And so if we're going to push for ethical practices, we're going to have to push for it from the ground up and hold companies that are building AI programs accountable for the things that they're doing. And so that means that we don't just use the AI, but we think about what is it they're collecting? Why are they collecting it? We look at those policies. So before I use an AI, I look at their policies and see, am I okay with this? And if I'm not okay with it, I don't use it, regardless of what everyone says. This is so great. This is the best one. And if a policy changes, then I reevaluate and look at it. So if we're waiting for governments to take action, I think it's going to be really slow. So we need to be proactive in pushing towards more equitable, ethical, that's the word I meant.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I know you have to run, so thank you so much for your responses today. Christina, anything else to add to this topic of kind of the ethics and justice-oriented approaches to some of this new technology that we're experiencing right now?
I think Elizabeth hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's grassroots. We have to be responsible users, and we have to spread the word on that. I mean, I think again, it's only going to come from those of us on the ground right now. So
great. Thank you so much. And that is, I wish we could stay for another hour for the remainder of the questions that I'm sure we all have. But I just want to thank everyone for being here today. That is all the time we have for today. A huge thank you to our support team. I've got Allison Camacho here, Nick Gordon, who is a tremendous help on our outreach team. He's been helping me identify some of these questions today. Marie Pineda, who works with the specialist program, as well as our fabulous panelists, and of course, Tony Newman, too. We'll have a post-event survey ready for you shortly, along with a recording of today's event and some resources our panelists recommend. Quite a few questions were about recommended resources, so our panelists have very kindly compiled a list of their favorite resources for you. So I'll be sending that out shortly as well, and you'll probably be getting a link in the chat right now for that as well. Please go to our website or reach out via email if you have questions about any of our programs, including the specialist program. Thank you all, and we hope to see you in future events.